Today we were talking about practical things, practical stuff, practical strategies. Part 2, we actually got to change this, right? Identifying and pursuing our goals. Right? This is our new framing of part 2. Now, granted, it's going to feel more practical, but really there's practical stuff in part 1, part 2, and part 3. So there's no reason to just say that this is the only one that's practical. But this is specifically what we're trying to do, which is how we've been writing out this outline so far. So just like last week, just like the week before, I'm going to be going through unorganized notes, and I'm going to put them into our rough organization of an outline that we have going on here. And then once we're done all that, then we can start really, it's going to be both figuring out how we should reorder things. Let's make sure that the overarching narrative is sound, and then it's going to be, okay, now we have to fill in everything that fits the narrative points. What are those called? The narrative hits? The narrative, I don't remember. But let's just kind of go through. All right, intentionality and possibilities, all GPT to be vetted. You've raised a powerful and crucial question about how reflection can be intentionally used to shape our world, how we might guide someone to develop reflective habits in a way that influences their life. Let's just start with this, maybe. What you're pointing out is that reflection isn't just an abstract philosophical exercise. It can be a powerful practical tool for shaping thought patterns, guiding decisions, and transforming how we relate to the world. Right. So that's not, I mean, we point that out initially in part 1, but we don't make it clear how effective that can be until part 2. And that's going to have to be maybe like, this is a general idea that we're pushing throughout part 2. Now that we've provided the foundation for the science behind this in part 1. So I can throw all of this into like the top here. Yeah, let's just do that, and I'll just get rid of that extra spacing. We don't need it now. I wish there was a hotkey for that. Keybind. To guide someone on how to use reflection intentionally, you're right that we should both turn to philosophical insights and empirical findings from psychology and neuroscience about internalization and habit formation. By understanding how habits of thought are built through routine and repetition, we can offer a concrete strategy for making reflection an intentional and transformative practice. Okay, here we go. Introduce the power of reflection. The first step is to help someone understand the power of reflection as a tool for self-shaping. Drawing from that, you can explain that reflection allows us to become aware of our thoughts. So we've already done that, obviously. It's not just about creating meaning and the creative inductive nature. Okay, so we got that all down. By understanding that reflection is the process by which we realign our thoughts with our deeper values and goals, someone can see it as a method for actively shaping their world. So that's what we kind of talk about for identifying or reflecting on values, interests, possibility, and then this is going to lead into making goals explicit pretty much. The key message, so what is this? Reflecting on values. We have to reflect on like understanding itself, and then maybe reflecting on values, interest, and possibility kind of goes into making goals explicit. Maybe this should go into that. This is on making our understanding explicit. So then we have to think about reflecting on these things as specific to making our goals explicit, and this would be like the first thing that comes up. So now this is going to be considering possibility in relation to ourself and our goals, pretty much. But I do want to grab this. This is a different thing, this little point, and I want to put this in the habits section because we should talk about habits in that way as well here. So by the end of this section, we need to make it clear that we can think about habits of thought as well as motor movements and etc. I should just say intuitive habits, intuitively understood. And it's probably going to involve pointing out that those intuitively understood habits are actually quite related to our thoughts. That's usually going to be the trend. So we kind of already have done this. By understanding that, we can realign our... Yep. Key message here is that reflection gives us agency. Okay, so we've already done this. This is part one, pretty much. Reflection as habitualization, building a routine of thought. The next step is to discuss how reflection can be internalized through habit formation. This is where established science about habit building and cognitive routines comes into play. Tells us habits are formed through repetition, that natural pathways become strengthened the more we engage in certain patterns of thought or behavior. Okay. So this is like a type of point we want to make there. And why are we creating so much space? Why is this one creating that space too? It's probably because I got this all from LLMs and they do that. Here are some specific ways someone can build reflective habits. Okay, here we go. Should we include this? Set aside time for daily reflection. Journaling is a reflective tool. So this is all stuff that we actually look at near the end here. Can we just like... This is already all regular text. That's rough. Journaling. So could we just throw this stuff in where it needs to be? Oh man, that's the worst. I have to get rid of this every single time. Okay. Daily reflection. So this is like reassessment. Kind of falls in the same. That's great. That's just the best. Oh no. Oh, these aren't. Yikes. How do I do this? Can I do, oops. Yeah, I can. Awesome. Let's... All right, we got that. Mindfulness and metacognition. We talk about mindfulness, but we kind of talk about it. Mindfulness really should be like up here, like in... No, it's gonna be a 4. mindfulness practice. So we're already going to have talked about the benefits of mindfulness by this point. So I might want to move that point actually. Yeah, you know what? I think we should just put this in the mindfulness section and not have to put all of our notes in two places at once. But this is meditation. We're looking for mindfulness specifically as a separate topic. So let's do mindfulness. But there's other parts of meditation that are... So let's do mindfulness and meditation. That might be the way to go here. Uncategorized mindfulness. Okay. Let's just throw that here. Cool. We don't know where Stoicism can go yet. Mindfulness and metacognition, that's what I just pasted. Using reflection to shape your world. Now that we've established how reflection can be habitualized, the next question is, how does reflection actually shape the world? This is all just fluff, though. I mean, we're going to want to put this type of thing here and there, but I don't think we're going to have like section headers like this. These would go in their respective places. Like there's not much here, but like change their behavior. We have a place for that. Seek new opportunities. Obviously we started out with that. Build different relationships. We're going to have things about building relationships. Strengthening identity and self-understanding. By engaging in consistent, someone strengthens their sense of identity and develops a deeper... yeah, we can just grab this. I'll just grab that, put that into the relationship with self-identity, or relationship with self. Is there a way that I can just like... I don't want to get rid of all of it, but I guess I could just... Oh, is there no space here currently? Or do I have to do the whole add and then remove? And then now it's going to be all nice. By engaging in consistent reflection, someone can... Okay. Yep. Yeah, I'm just going to cut that. Cut that. Empirical support, the science of internalization habits. I think I'm just going to get... This is all just kind of... Everything's kind of connected together here. It's probably not the best telling of what we're trying to get. Conclusion. Okay, let's just cut that. Let's cut that out. Intentionally influencing hormones. The thesis here is that we can do certain things to affect the effectiveness of the hormones that affect our learning, internalization, habitualizing, and maintaining habit mechanisms. Okay, I actually want to know. Can I get on ChatGPT? Okay. What is the conceptual difference between neuromodulators and hormones? Like where's the differences? The key conceptual difference between neuromodulators and hormones lies in the scope, speed, and mechanism of their action. even though both are chemical messengers in the body. Here's a breakdown. Neuromodulators are released within the nervous system, typically from neurons into the synaptic space or extracellular fluid of the brain. Hormones are released by specialized glands into the bloodstream. Okay. So I feel like I think my telling of this, surprise, surprise, I'm not a neuroscience, but it's a little limited. The telling that we do in part 1, especially in the area that we're about to get to, is slightly limited in its scope of or in its comprehension of all that's going on in the brain and body. And I've just kind of been getting a little more of that from reading that Damasio book I keep yapping about. Range of effect. Neuromodulators act locally but can influence networks of neurons beyond the immediate synapse. Their effects tend to be regional within the nervous system. Hormones act systemically. Once in circulation, they can reach distant organs and tissues throughout the body. So I guess one question is, is it the case that the same chemical messengers pass through the BBB, brain blood barrier, and go from acting as one as neuromodulator to hormone and vice versa? Like, is there a correlation of release such that one influences the other and vice versa? Range of effect. Okay, so we got that. Speed of action. Neuromodulators are relatively fast compared to hormones, though slower than classical neurotransmitters. Their effects can last from seconds to minutes, sometimes hours in cases like dopamine. Hormones usually act more slowly, often taking minutes to hours or even days to exert measurable effects. Cortisol and stress response. Thyroid hormones regulating metabolism. Function. Neuromodulators adjust the excitability and responsiveness of neurons. Instead of transmitting discrete on-off signals like neurotransmitters, they change how strongly a neuron responds. Hormones regulate system-wide physiological processes such as growth, metabolism, reproduction, and homeostasis. Right. Okay. Transport mechanism. So the cool thing is that through that book, The Strange Order of Things, Damasio broadens this idea of homeostasis to even include the behavior of the neuromodulators. Transport mechanism. Neuromodulators diffuse locally, affecting nearby neurons without necessarily relying on synaptic precision. Hormones rely on the circulatory system, traveling longer distances through the blood. Overlap. The line isn't always strict. Okay. Some substances can function as both neuromodulators and hormones depending on context. For example, oxytocin acts as a hormone when released into the bloodstream, affecting childbirth and lactation, but also as a neuromodulator in the brain. Norepinephrine works as a neuromodulator in the brain, but as a hormone when released by the adrenal glands into circulation. So that doesn't really answer my questions, but it kind of points in that direction. A diagram style table. The interface, right? That's what we're looking for. Can the same molecule act as both neuromodulator and hormone? Yes, some molecules serve dual roles depending on where they're released and how they travel. Norepinephrine in the brain and neuromodulator. Okay, but I'm really concerned. I'm really looking for, like, can the same like discrete what should I say? The Yeah, like can a single molecule like go from acting as one to the other, or is that not like is that a ridiculous type of question since it would be like used up? Most classical hormones do not freely cross the BBB. Instead, specialized transporters exist for some. Others act indirectly. Cortisol, for instance, can cross because it's lipophilic, but many peptide hormones cannot. Many neuromodulators, like dopamine, serotonin, do not cross the BBB efficiently. That's why giving serotonin orally doesn't elevate brain serotonin. Precursors like that are needed. Therefore, the same molecule doesn't usually freely pass back and forth across the BBB to switch roles. Instead, it's more about parallel signaling systems. Okay, so I think that answers our question, that even though it's the same type of molecule or the same molecule by type, it's not the same specific molecules crossing. But even if the same molecule doesn't always cross, there is tight coordination between brain neuromodulators and peripheral hormones. Hypothalamic pituitary axis stress, hypothalamus release that leads to acts locally in the brain and triggers pituitary release of what is ACTH? Is this acetylcholine? No, that would not be. Is this do we have it up here? We probably have it somewhere. ACTH? No, it's only here. Nice. Hormone produced, so it's literally just, here we go. Adrenocorticotropic. Okay, very nice. That stimulates adrenal cortisol release. Cortisol, a hormone, feeds back into the brain, modulating CRH, hypothalamus release, and neuromodulator systems. Okay, cool. So yeah, this whole process is what Damasio would describe as homeostatic, I guess, in the sense that it's kind of supporting this system of making sure everything's in I don't know, a good enough state. Things aren't going too out of order, but also promoting like positive growth within that order. So does one influence the other? Yes, but mostly indirectly. Instead of the exact same molecule passing freely between compartments, the nervous and endocrine system use feedback loops and parallel release. Okay. Sometimes the same molecule is used in both domains, but usually through separate release routes, not diffusion across the BBB. Okay. I don't know. Oh, lost that one. I don't know my chemistry all too well. What causes a molecule, I should say one of these molecules, to cease from being and continuing in these homeostatic processes? All right, what do we got? We got one wrong, and then we got both wrong. That's really a great question. You're asking about what turns off or clears away chemical messengers, whether they're neuromodulators or hormones, once they've done their job in maintaining homeostasis in the nervous system. When a neuromodulator like dopamine, serotonin, or norepinephrine is released in the brain, it cannot linger forever. Otherwise, the system would get stuck on. The brain has several built-in shut-off mechanisms. Reuptake, special transporter proteins on neurons pull the molecule back inside for recycling. Okay. Enzymes chemically. Okay, so this is what we're really looking for, right? Enzymatic breakdown. Enzymes chemically. Okay, and enzymes. We got our proteins that act as a biological catalyst, accelerating chemical reactions without being consumed in the process. Wow, that's really cool. Dismantle the molecule into inactive parts. Example, monoamine oxidase breaks down dopamine. So this is the enzyme, I'm guessing, breaks down dopamine, serotonin, and norepinephrine. Diffusion away. Some molecules simply drift out of the active zone into surrounding fluid where they're less effective. Okay. I'm curious if they ever get back or if they're like funneled, not funneled, but brought to a place where molecules can be sorted through, etc. Or if that sorting process is kind of natural as it pushes up against different parts of the brain. I'm sorry, different parts of the body. Okay, in the endocrine system, hormones. Hormones circulate in the blood and influence tissues throughout the body. Their removal is slower and more systemic. Enzymatic breakdown in organs. Hormones get chemically dismantled, mostly in the liver and kidneys. Cortisol is broken down in the liver into inactive metabolites, then excreted in urine. Excretion. Hormones or their breakdown products are filtered out by the kidneys into urine or by bile into the feces. Okay. Target cell uptake and use. Some hormones are taken up by cells and bound to receptors, after which they're degraded inside the cell. How are they degraded inside the cell? Similar? I'm guessing it's like a similar type of thing. Short half-lives versus long half-lives. Peptide hormones like insulin are cleared quickly. Minutes. Steroid hormones like cortisol and testosterone last longer because they bind to carrier proteins in the blood. This ensures hormones don't flood the body indefinitely and that their levels can be finely tuned. Homeostatic ceasing mechanisms. In both systems, the body prevents overshoot by negative feedback. High levels of a hormone often signal the brain pituitary to stop releasing more. Neuromodulators can activate presynaptic receptors on the very neurons that release them, saying enough for now. This feedback loop is the control switch that tells the body when to stop producing more of a given messenger. Simply put, neuromodulators stop acting because they're reabsorbed, broken down, or drift away. Hormones stop acting because they're metabolized, excreted, or used up by cells. Both are tightly regulated by feedback signals, so production itself shuts down when levels get too high. Awesome. Okay. That was a cool side mission. But let's get back to it. The thesis here is that we can do certain things to affect the effectiveness of the hormones that affect our learning internal. Okay, so it would be hormones and neuromodulators. Given that when we're talking about especially influencing like learning, then we are, I think we're talking about that's the context of neuromodulation rather than hormones. Despite the fact that they can affect one another. They're simply tools that we can understand and use. Okay. Cold plunges. Oh, man, we got to look at the cold plunges. This would be something on dopamine. So do we have something that's like generally speaking? Hormones and neuromodulation? I'll put it down here. Hormones and neuromodulators increase dopamine levels significantly. So this is dopamine, I guess, throughout the body, but also in the brain. affecting your focus and your learning, etc. But also, I guess, affecting other parts of the brain, other parts of the body. Exercise. So exercise needs to be its own. Nice. Diet. Diet. Nutrition. Was this stuff like from Huberman? What's going on here? Tryptophan. I feel like I've heard him say that. Let's just get this in a bullet point. Meditation. Here we go. Mindfulness are linked to something. Serotonin is influenced not just by external activities, but also by cognitive reframing and perception. Practices such as this can influence serotonin levels. All right, so we got to figure out that one. And stuff like this actually probably should come sooner. Like, these are main players. Medication and PEDs affect these guys. And these guys actually affect what we're trying to do. So I think that's going to be... like, cognitive training is even like a lower... okay. This is a more fundamental section than... I should just say concept than the rest of this, than the rest of these sections. These other sections usually affect hormones and neuromodulation. Hello, Energy Dumpster. Welcome back. We're doing practical stuff today. Working on part 2. Looking through these notes. Oh, emergent meta strategy. Here's what we arrive at a meta strategy. Here's why we arrive at a meta strategy. We make the case that what the metaphysics tells us is that we are always pursuing a goal. The meta ethics are inherent with... Okay, so this is old language that we've used, but we can then make the case that understanding the metaphysics allows us to... Okay. So we've got that down. So it goes like... We need an understanding of... Okay, we already did all that. That's great. We understand our goals are more... okay, we need to make the case that understanding our goals is inherently necessary. That's what we do, make the case. We end with the... Okay, all this stuff is good. We already got it. Suggestions. Yeah, certainly. Any suggestions in terms of stuff that we could put in part 2, I would gladly take. In accordance with our conceptualization, we set up the necessary explanations that allow readers to become aware of the tools that they can utilize for certain reasons. Then, when we give the readers the abstract prompt of pursuing abstract goals, they can determine whether... Okay, that's the... this is like another thesis of part 2. Okay, and then this is where we start getting into part 3. So let's put this at the top. JP's clean your room example, in the most basic immediate sense, we would have to incorporate literature about the effect of clutter on the brain in the broadest sense. So this is kind of a discussion of scarcity, actually. So actually, where does scarcity show up? This is going to be in here, right? Is it under emotions? Let's just have this as a separate topic. And I kind of think that scarcity and having an unclean room are in the same category of discussion. Is this fitting in the discussion? Oh, okay. What's going on here? My intention is to develop blah blah blah. Essentially, the most I can get out of there, introducing no moral framework, leveraging only logical puzzle bound by the rational implications that are not finding the ethical norms that have emerged and inherent. Okay. Specifically from an. Yep. Right. We may. Okay, this is all part 3 stuff. So I'll put that in there. So I'll just do it here. Part 3, morality. Part 2, okay. All right, what is the praxeological philosophy? This seems rather not related to what we're talking about today at all. Like, we're kind of, I mean, even though philosophy is necessary here, like, we're kind of out of the heavy philosophy business in part 2. We're simply working on identifying and pursuing our goals, leveraging empirical science to help us do things. So this is like, how do we identify our goals? How do we pursue them? How do we keep track of our emotions? I believe this philosophy is related to human nature, right? But our part 1 was our human nature section, really. But let's see. Praxeology in Austrian economics is the method. Okay, so economics, first of all, is way out of our scope. But human action, though. Wait, what's going on here? Austrian economics, especially developed by, which studies purposeful behavior as distinct from reflexes or mere physiological responses. Okay, so our document does like to actually reduce things down to physiological responses, but, you know, obviously once we get to part 2, we have to consider that we do have some power with our ability to reflect. Argued that all economic theory begins with the acts. Okay, so we don't care about economic theory for sure in all of the document. But yeah, purposefully acting is something important for part 2, especially since we have to identify our goals and make them explicit. I don't know if you were here for the end of part 1, but we kind of arrived at a framework of freedom that really pointed out how important reflecting on our deliberate intentions are. And we actually connected that with the science of the brain and body, which is really cool. It's a deductive system. We can't use a deductive system. Argued that the proposition humans act purposefully is a synthetic a priori. Yeah, so this is like interpreting what humans are doing, and it's going to be a kind of just like a philosophy exercise, but I don't think this is going to be practical at all. Like, it's why it's a discussion of how this phrase is apt or not apt, and you could make arguments for either one, but synthetic because it adds substantive knowledge about the world. Yeah, we don't Okay. More on implications for market processes. Okay. Critique of falsificationism. Observations in economics are not theory neutral. Data is always interpreted within a conceptual framework. For example, yep, this is what we talk about in part 1. Okay, justifying purposeful action as unfalsifiable but valid. To deny that humans act purposely is itself a purposeful act. Well, once again, only if you assume that this is like it's like something, the conclusion as a premise, concluding the premise, right? This is concluding the premise. To deny that humans act purposely is itself a purposeful act if and only if what you're considering as purposeful acts is the same thing that the person's denying, though. So they're denying both that what they're doing is a purposeful act and that humans act purposely. So there would be no conceptual contradiction there. All empirical sciences rely on interpretive categories. Economics is no different. Yep, this is what we believe. Falsificationism ignores this by pretending data is raw. Okay, so yeah, we're not a fan of that, but is Kerzner's theory of alertness relevant to the document's self-help stuff? Let's see. Economics. Okay. Oh, Popper. Oh, I remember that. Okay. Kerzner's concept of entrepreneurial alertness is one of his most important contributions to Austrian economics. The problem Kerzner is addressing. Markets are often modeled as if so this is like higher order in like systems that we're talking about. I don't think this relates to what we talk about in part 1 or part 2, because we're so much more close to home in terms of what's actually happening and how we actually talk about knowledge. I read this article which talks about this, which is why I recommended this. I would recommend you read it in your free time. Oh my gosh, that was a straight up PDF. All right. What is alertness? Defines alertness as the distinctive trait of the entrepreneur. Yeah, so this is like we're trying to do something different in this document. Like some random philosopher's interpretation of what something is not all too helpful unless it really intuitively connects with what we know about the science of our experience and our understanding. That's kind of the power of what we've done in part 1, and that's kind of the power of what we're now allowed to do in part 2. But the ability to notice opportunities for profit, like we talk about a little bit of how the brain works in terms of possibility in part 1, and then in our making our understanding explicit and making our goals explicit, we're going to have to consider creativity. We're going to have to consider what we can practically do to make opportunities clear and explicit to us, and all that's involved in that. And I don't know where that's going to take us, but it can't take us in the direction of just like random conceptualizations of opportunity, noticing opportunity. Like we have to look into the empirical science on what actually affects our ability to maximize our noticing opportunities and possibilities and you know, creativity in general. All right. Set specific intentions, have them clear. Okay, so we already kind of got that in there. Oh, never mind. I'm literally getting rid of our actual stuff now. When I want to go into back to this, oh, okay, I gotta cut through this. We are in a position to consider what it looks like for the. Okay, we gotta just cut this out. We already have one simple ethic required for participation in the community of trust. Yeah, let's chill on this. What ought to be and what ought I do according to such an understanding? Eventually we will arrive at, regardless of change, I will always find myself prospectively oriented towards a goal that I want to reach. Right, so we made this more clear by pointing out our own, I guess we did more of a phenomenology of concerns. That a clear path towards an intention is unintelligible because the intention is similarly fleeting. So we make sense of that as well. That's the whole freedom through realignment. Positive side of awareness is trusting. Okay. We don't need that. Here we have done the magical act of finding an abstract value structure without having to take any further commitments than simply, let's just get rid of that. Will you read that article in your free time out of curiosity? Probably not. I just, if it's going to be about economics and like a philosophical conceptualization of human intentionality, then chances are I'm not going to be all too interested. We have a pretty robust view of intentionality in part 1. Like it's pretty excellent in the sense that it literally incorporates our physiology, our like the leading cognitive science interpretations of the behavior of our brain and how it affects our experience, how it affects our understanding. We leverage we do leverage a philosophical interpretation of concepts in order to connect those two things. It's specifically about epistemology and human nature. Economics is the focus, but I believe you should consider it. Could we maybe do it on Friday? Probably not. I really don't think it's relevant. My concern is that you don't quite understand what we've done in part 1, which is leading me to say that it's probably not going to be like worth the time. Not to say that it's probably not interesting or that, you know, certainly that I'm not trying to say that you ought not have been interested in it, but it just won't help us on our course because it's probably going to be a different type of discussion than the one that we want to have in part 1. And I would probably argue and speculate that it's going to be less grounded or less practically useful. On Friday we can do it whatever, but usually we're watching stuff and it's like a more fun Friday. But it's also like I'm not trying to watch anything on Friday. Like so I will actually turn down ideas if they're not specifically going to like aid in what we're trying to do. Like we're still on like a wave right now where there's certain topics that we're kind of discussing on stream, certain topics that I'm working towards. I mean, part 2 is kind of up in the air. So anything that's like really relevant to part 2, I would say is going to be welcome. Part 3 is a little far away, but we can do it. We were kind of talking about the moral landscape last week. And then in part one, we're reading through the experience in the moment section next, and then we're going to start talking about how our understanding changes over time. So we're about to get into the thick of science and neurobiology and biology in general. How will you know whether it's relevant for the document if you haven't read it? Well, if it's related to what we just went over in the ChatGPT, then I can be decently certain. Certainly, I am speculating. And I'm not saying that it's like there's certainly the possibility that it would have an effect on me. Like perhaps it makes me think of something that would be important. But it's just, yeah, I gotta be pretty judicious. Is that the word? Especially once more people get in here, because I imagine a lot of people are going to want me to look at a bunch of different things, and we got to be sparing. But yeah, habitualizing reflection is not a goal of mindful meditation to have a mind that never wanders off. Rather, the goal is to instill a habit of self-consciousness. Noticing that your mind... Okay, so this is not something that we need to talk about, because we can look at the data and we can see what's actually happening to the brain. So I don't want to speculate as to what's actually happening in response to a meditative practice or getting that habit in there. We don't operate every day majoritively in a mode of intentional reflection, reflective self-consciousness. We have to do things in life. What we are attempting is to prompt self-conscious reflection throughout our life. Yep. Mindful meditation is the exercise of intentional routine that habitualizes self-reflection. Transition towards being more mindful is one in which the noticing of thoughts goes from noticing them as their content to intentionally noticing them. Okay. Sam Harris, we can do nothing, which is actually a doing. All right. All right, we're up to this necessary research for part 2. Habit formation and change. These authors provide practical frameworks for building good habits and breaking bad ones. Beautiful. Let's gank all of that and put it into the habits section. Should this just be called habits? And I'll just put it right here. I promise you it's not directly relevant to the neurophysiological studies you're interested in, but I believe as you start looking into theories of human action, having a multidisciplinary approach, which takes the best work, not just from cognitive science, but social sciences, including econ to some extent, will help. So I guess just to be clear about the scope of the document, I don't think we never really get to broader takes on societal or population-based behavior. Like we are only focused on what you can do, like what each person individually can do with their own volition, their own reflection, and their own circumstances. So even though there's a discussion about empirical science in general requiring multiple people, like it requires sufficiently sized studies and whatnot and random samples, etc. It's not like we're trying to study how people behave in larger groups, except unless it tells you how you're going to behave. Like, we don't care how people behave. We care how you will behave for the sake of you knowing what to do about it. So in that case, that would be where it might connect. However, I don't think that's where economic discussion would come into play, because economic discussion is concerned with broad, like macro patterns. And so even if you conceptualize what someone's doing as intentional or whatnot, then I mean, you are throwing your hat in the ring in terms of like the free will debate or whatever intentionality means. All right, how about this? You don't have to, but will you consider just reading the first several pages on Friday? And if you don't find it relevant enough, you can stop reading it. Austrian economics specifically is focused on micro patterns. What to do here? Well, the one thing we could do is just throw it in here. And then what I could also do is I could throw my document in here and see what happens. The paper explores the methodological a prioriism of economist, that arguing that his position was advanced for its time and remains relevant to modern economics. A priori foundation asserts that economic theory is comprised solely of a priori propositions. This means economic laws are not derived from experience, but are known through logical deduction. Wait a second. Is comprised solely of a priori propositions, but that means that they're known through logical deduction? This axiom is considered a priori because one cannot experience the world without purpose. Argued that this was not an arbitrary starting point, but one imposed by the reality of the world. Rooted the logic of choice within a broader logic of action called praxeology. Economic laws are deduced from the action axiom, and if deduced correctly, they're apodictically certain and not open to empirical falsification. All right, what's going on here? All right, I have to put it in my document. I got to see what's going on here. Add from drive. Yes. My drive. Okay, this is what I'm looking for. Can you help me better understand that article in using my document as a reference so that I can see what type of arguments the Mises is making? Is it something that my document would condone or agree with? Is my document something, I should say, similarly, is my document something Mises would condone or agree with? Let's just see where that leads us. Okay, what do we got? Okay. Cognitive biases and debiasing. Yes. Huge. Absolutely crucial. This is going to be... We have to figure out where to put this type of thing, but... just like generally here. Willpower and self-regulation and goal setting. So this is like motivation generally, which we kind of had up here, but I think we're going to need to find a better place for it. Okay, I just psyched myself out. All right, let's break down the arguments. And was Mrs. right by comparing them to the concepts in your Stanford Richardson document. This comparison reveals fascinating points of overlap and significant philosophical disagreements. In short, your document and Mrs. methodology share a profound agreement that human action is purposeful and that a purely materialist or naively empirical view is insufficient to understand human experience. That said, I don't think we would talk about purpose in the same way. However, you diverge fundamentally on the source and nature of knowledge. Mrs. argues for timeless, certain truths deduced from a single starting point, while your framework embraces a dynamic, fallible, and evolving understanding grounded in empirical science and lived experience. So, I mean, I'm not trying to be so blunt, but I kind of have to be. Like, the second I see this, the argues for timeless, certain truths deduced from a single starting point, like, I just have to throw it. I got to take it, and I got to throw it as far as possible away from the philosophy of our document, because I see something profoundly inappropriate with doing this. Not that it's, like, wrong in some fundamental sense, but, well, actually, I would say it's, like, wrong in some fundamental sense, but not that it's, like, absolutely wrong, but that it's not going to be as apt as I think that we are going to be in pointing out the dynamic nature of knowledge itself. Okay, understanding Mrs. Argument through your framework, we can translate the core ideas into the language of the Stanford Richardson document. Doing so makes his position clearer and highlights where the two systems align and diverge. The axiom of action as a foundational commitment. Mrs. begins all economic theory with the axiom of action, the undeniable truth that humans act purposefully. He considers this an a priori truth known through introspection, not experience. Your framework's translation, this axiom is what your document would describe as a core part of our implicit self-understanding. It is a foundational, unconscious commitment we have about ourselves as agents. For Mrs., this, is it Mises? I feel like I'm butchering his name.
We are looking at how to pronounce the name of this Austrian economist. In German, it's said that as Ludwig von Mises.
Mises, okay. For Mises, this is a static, self-evident truth. For you, it would be an evolutionarily ancient, socially reinforced, and neurobiologically embedded feature of our predisposition, a core tenet of our brain's predictive model of being a self in the world. Okay. I mean, I could slightly forgive that one, that difference, because you could just say we're concerned about humans right now, and that's fine. Maybe he's just not doing a like a comprehensive view of why we experience the things that we experience, and that's fine. From the axiom of action, Mises logically deduces the entire body of economic theory, which he calls praxeology. This is where we're going to have the most beef with, because once again, when we're saying that, like you could, we're in the document, we're essentially saying you could conceptualize us having an implicit understanding of what we're doing at all points. You could consider that when you take anything to exist explicitly or not, you're committing to it existing in that way. So there is purpose in your very cognitive nature. Like you're always oriented towards something, some possibility. That said, we can't now take what our conceptualization and then use that to deduce things in an absolute way. We can only leverage our intuition and what people think is rational in order to now point out what that might imply. Mises in engaging in an act of deliberate reflection on the semantic structure of the concept of action. Oh, that's what he's doing. He's systematically unpacking its conceptual relations of incompatibility and consequence. For example, the idea that to act is to choose one thing over another is a relation of consequence that Mises would explore The apodictic certainty he feels is what your document identifies as the powerful feeling of certainty that accompanies a coherent predictive model, in this case, a purely logical one. Right. So to think that one's predictive model is akin to some absolute logic would be inappropriate. Mises' argument, the laws of economics being logically deduced. So our argument is pretty much that you can't deduce almost anything. Like unless you create the system in which deduction makes sense, then you can't deduce things. You can only induce. So the reason why there's deduction in like mathematics is because we've created the rules of mathematics such that you can deduce things in mathematics. Same with logic. Like we've created rules of logic where deduction can make sense, but we're leveraging these very deeply ingrained rational structures that we have in our brains. But people find different things to be rational and not rational. So even that can only get you so far. You have to rely on the other person having some understanding of the rules of rationality itself, or of logic itself. Your framework's translation, Mises' laws function like the deep normative structure of our shared conceptual understanding. The rule one ought not demand more of a good when its price rises is a core part of the shared framework we use to make economic phenomena intelligible. All right. Let's just get to the agreements and disagreements. The primacy of subjective experience and purpose. Okay. Critique of naive empiricism. The importance of a coherent framework. I mean, these are pretty broad things, so there's a lot of room for disagreement here. The distinctiveness of human science. Mises argues for methodological dualism, stating the science of human action is fundamentally different from the natural sciences because its subjects are conscious actors. Right. I mean, there's just a gap between our like complexity. Like we don't understand how like the brain works materially, like how everything in the body works materially, in the sense that we can't make a prediction about what's going to happen because there's too many systems at play. But in theory, if you did understand the entire, like I could see a language model or some type of AI model to get your entire internal state, it could predict where you might go or where you will go and what you would do. Okay. Where we disagree is certainty versus fallibility. This is the core conflict. Mises' system is built on achieving perfectly certain and incontestable truths. Your framework is built on the opposite, the recognition of our own fallibility and the embrace of uncertainty as the very engine of learning. Mises seeks finality. You see understanding as an ongoing reconstructive process where no conclusion is ever final. I don't think we even use the word reconstructive in our document. A priori logic versus empirical science. Mises grounds his entire system in a priori logic, independent of experience. He would be deeply skeptical of your framework's reliance on empirical science, especially neuroscience and psychology, as a foundation for understanding the mind. Your document explicitly integrates insights from predictive processing, embodied cognition, and evolutionary biology, fields Mises would likely dismiss as irrelevant to the logical certainty of praxeology. Oh, what is going on? Stream promotion. Is this a new type of spam that we're going to have to combat? Static versus dynamic understanding. For Mises, the axiom of action is a timeless, unchanging truth. For your framework, our understanding is inherently dynamic, constantly being updated by neuroplasticity. Now, there's a chance that he's talking about something in like a Heideggerian sense, where he's abstracting it so significantly that you could say, like, in theory, what Heidegger's talking about is timeless, even though that our understanding of our own interpretations of what he's talking about is subject to change. So, like, we could get into that weird space. I think he's speaking in a more Heideggerian sense. Yep. Yeah, I mean that's fair enough. But yeah, once again, we're only going to be leveraging his anecdotal, speculative conceptualization of what's happening without applying what we know about science, cognitive science, etc. Because yeah, once you ask him to actually then make a prediction about the macro, then now he's going to have to speculate, leveraging what he's got, and he might not feel like he's speculating. Like, I'm not saying that he probably feels like he has a deduction to make. He knows exactly what's going to happen, but the nature of truth. For Mises, truth is something to be logically deduced and arrived at with certainty. For you, objective truth is an implicit and authoritative standard that our subjective understanding holds itself accountable to, with prediction error or the call of conscience serving as the signal that we may be wrong. Mises' truth is absolute. Your truth is a pragmatic, self-correcting process. Yeah, he would probably disagree with my document. But yeah, I guess once again, to make the point, like the nature of truth and the certainty versus fallibility, like we like, perhaps there's something useful to be gained about like a philosopher's conceptualization. Like, maybe there's a very powerful intuitive aspect to it, and maybe it implies something that we might be missing. That said, these conflicts are deal breakers. To be fair, the truth Mises is talking about is only social scientific truths, not other truths. But like, what do we mean by when we say social scientific truths? Like, how people behave? Because then I would demand that he leverages social science in order to know social scientific truths. Specifically, how people behave with regards to purposeful action in economics. Right. But I don't understand how. Okay, first of all, I wouldn't understand how his axioms here wouldn't then provide value for seeing how humans behave in any situation, given that purposeful action is a priori. But then specifically with economics, there's so many things at play that empirical science tells us about. Things like loss aversion, things like social dynamics where you're, relative poverty, stuff like that. The insights of scarcity. All of these things are completely going to be hidden from his deductive logic. Like, we're not as simple as just, acting like it. Yeah, we're not simple actors. So yeah, once again, I think he can arrive at some decent hypotheses, but he needs to test those hypotheses for us to even care about his logic. All right, what do we got? We're at an hour 14. I probably should do a little more, and then we're going to jump on Hades. If you want to understand his justifications regarding his Austrian theory and economics, I believe it would be more practical to read the original source and how it accounts for these multifaceted things than just rely on AI. I agree. I don't think it's worthwhile to understand his justifications. I trust the AI enough to give me the general enough of the general gist to know that even if I did spend all that time, it wouldn't be useful. I don't know. I mean, certainly I'm leveraging my own intuition here, but I have to trust my intuition on this one. Okay, mindfulness, meditation, and stress management. It's really important that we make progress in all these things, and there's a lot to do right now. I can't be spending time in obscure philosophical conceptualizations if they might touch on human theory of mind and behavior, etc. Like, we need to be very. This is why, like, especially for part 1, I need people to give me feedback in relation to what is already actually in section 1, like, or part 1. Like, I'm looking for people to prove that they have read part 1 and understand it in how their feedback shows that there's something wrong with part 1. Like, I know there's things wrong with part 1. I need someone to show me that they understand what is actually wrong with part 1, and not just like, I can't brute force researching things that are not obviously beneficial. On the contrary, something like The Strange Order of Things, which is what I'm reading right now, this is really relevant. So I do need to just read this. I don't know. I didn't even know what this thing was about, but I shouldn't say that. The AI gave me enough of a. This is an example where the AI was right on the money. Gemini told me what this was generally about and how it would help strengthen a section. And so then I kind of went in not knowing actually what this thing really covered. And I am so stoked that I'm reading this right now because it's actually going to help a lot. Fine. Sorry if you don't find it relevant, but can you maybe do it in the future after you've made progress? Probably not. Like, I'm pretty certain it's not. I'm pretty certain it's not relevant. I do apologize. I don't want to come across like I'm being too dismissive, but yeah, in the future we're gonna need to be working on something else. Like, it's an odd thing to consider that we're ever going to be in a place where we can just chill. Like, we need to be making content. We need to be working on growing the channel. We got to be doing a lot of things, and we're at the point where we have actually something really nice in part 1. Like, there's a lot of great stuff in here that I like. To be more specific, like, it's not that I don't think it's going to be like related at all. I think it's not going to be able to benefit us. Like, it's not going to be able to add anything to our discussion that we currently have. Our discussion is pretty comprehensive in part 1. We cover a lot of great topics. Now I am reading this, and this is showing me that we weren't comprehensive enough when it comes to the discussion of embodied cognition and all the stuff that's happening in our body that is actually affecting how we experience the world and how we experience meaning and how we consider what we understand. So epistemologically, this is actually much more important than some random other philosophy, even if it's an epistemological philosophy. I genuinely think that epistemologies that came out prior to an understanding of how the brain works is going to be less on the money than anyone that is actually justifying their conceptualization based on what we know about connections in the brain. I think we have to be both brutally honest about that and hold ourselves to that standard. Okay, so mindfulness. Learning strategies. Okay, we do have that. We do have learning as a topic. and it's kind of in an island on its own. Stoicism as a practical philosophy focused on resilience, virtue, and managing one's internal state. So this is one of those ones where I still don't know where this is actually going to fall, because Stoicism falls under all other like conceptual philosophies where perhaps there is actually genuine use in telling yourself a certain story, and it will perhaps affect you in positive ways. So we have to consider, like, what is actually the empirical science behind Stoicism, or should we actually just have the discussion be different, where we're looking into that science as a separate topic, like framing, like the topic of like that's what I should say. Perhaps these should fall under a broader topic of framing and self-identity. Like that's like more abstractly what we're trying to do there. In your theory of ethics, do you at all discuss the psychological research on moral development done by Lawrence Kohlberg? So we actually do not have a theory of ethics formulated yet, but I'm going to throw this in part 3. Notes. We're going to have to do what I'm doing right now in part 2, in part 3 once we get there. Look into the psychological research. Okay. I'm just going to have that there, and we'll get there eventually. Maybe next year. Maybe 2027. We'll see. Technology and cognitive enhancement. Analyze how to use digital tools to enhance productivity while avoiding their pitfalls. So this would be a broader discussion. This is going to be a similar discussion where... Actually, you know what? Let's uncategorize this, because this kind of falls under... This might fall under multiple areas in part 2. So as a general theme, this might be a theme that we want to like bring up early in part 2, and then point out that as we go through these things, we'll kind of point out what our most modern technology and tools allows us. Lifestyle factors. This document notes mention including these key levers in part 2, as they are foundational to cognitive performance and the ability to implement any other strategy. Yes. How sleep and emotions shape thinking. So that's something specific that we can put somewhere. Do we have sleep? Sleep. Okay, so we actually only want sleep here, and then we were going to take this for the emotions section that we have. And just kind of throw this here. Theology, mythology, and wisdom traditions. Eliad, your notes suggest exploring these as sources of hypotheses about living well. Okay, that goes straight to part 3. The progress principle. This is a psychological concept researched by Amabile, which posits that the most powerful motivator is making progress in meaningful work. So that we could put this under motivation. This might fall into part 3, but I think this is a motivation discussion. I understand you are hesitant to not rely on non-empirical science, but since you acknowledge that evidence is theory-laden, requiring a conceptual framework to interpret it, I wouldn't hesitate to look into something just because the person wasn't a cognitive scientist. The thing is pretty short, only 21 pages, so even if you don't want to read it on stream, I will probably not read it, just to be honest. Though I do agree with the the bulk of that. In part one, we actually, in the epilogue, we talk about what you just said there. Making sense of collective knowledge. We talk about the foundation of shared meaning. Then we get into the trajectory of wisdom. So philosophy would fall under this trajectory of wisdom. And then we talk about the developing authority of method. This is where we kind of bring up how science developed over time. And then we talk about integrating the domains of wisdom and science, where we point out that wisdom and philosophy can provide us with excellent hypotheses. And there's good reason why we might want to like really look into these and leverage them, whether that is because they've influenced a lot of people or they're from these texts that are ancient and developed over long periods of time, leading us to believe that they have crystallized wisdom. But in terms of knowing exactly that they can help us out, we need the empirical science that tells us that. So it's not that we need a philosopher to be an empirical scientist. It's that we need the philosophy to be empirically tested through science. Granted, there's probably going to be a large category of concepts and stories that don't have, like, it would be very weird to have science backed around them. And I do need to figure out how to make that stuff fit in our part two telling. And maybe it's literally just we have a discussion for framing where that covers, pretty much anything that we don't know for sure that it affects us in a positive way, but it seems like it, it's something like that. That said, I would very highly doubt that having a view about deductive axioms of economic theory and human behavior would easily and accessibly give people positive, beneficial framings. Like we would have to dumb it down. Like I'm really trying to find the most accessible way to talk about all these things. Which means that when we get a philosopher's conceptualization, even the ones that we use, which is like Hegel and Heidegger, we dumb them down. We only take what's necessary, and we only take what fits our intuitions and science. And so, yeah, I don't have too much free time besides the stream. Granted, I do play Hades now. And usually when I don't have a game, I'll probably do something after stream that's somewhat leisure, until 10 p.m. in which case, and then I'm usually reading for this, but the article itself mentions how Mises believed in falsification of specific economic predictions, so the AI was misinterpreting the nuance in his theory. I'm sure it was. Yeah, AI has been pretty hit or miss. But I'm still leveraging this deeply ingrained intuition that I have, where I'm not going to be able to provide you all the reasons why I don't want to read that, or why I don't think it would be necessary, or why I don't think it would be efficient. But that's kind of the way I feel, unfortunately. But I do think that the reasons I did give were pretty on point. Dopamine, prediction error, egotism, reward pathways. While the basics are in part one, a deeper dive here pertains to part two. Understanding how dopamine drives motivation, goal pursuit, and habit loses critical. Okay, so this is a motivation discussion. We can't make it just about dopamine. I'm pretty sure there's a lot involved in a discussion of motivation. You could write a whole book on all these topics. Also, do you discuss how language is related to ethics in the document? Yes, we do. We consider how we consider how you can think about the semantics of language in a normative, ethical way. Conceptualizing our understanding, we consider implicit conceptual understanding. We consider the structure of our conceptual understanding, and we consider how this can be looked at in a normative structure. And we actually make a compelling, grounded case for why we can think about our understanding as normative or ethical in some way. I was considering recommending The Theory of the Language Instinct and the Better Angels of Our Nature by Steven Pinker, but I don't know if you want that in part 2. I do think Steven Pinker is literally that Better Angels literally might be, nope, it's not. Okay, but Pinker, we have him for evolutionary psychology. Oh, this is in 2 of part 1, so I'm surprised I don't have Pinker somewhere else in this entire document. But I probably would be interested in reading another Steven Pinker book. What is it? Better Angels? Pinker. Argues that violence in the world has declined both in the long run and in the short run, and suggests explanation as to why this has occurred. So this is not relevant to anything we talk about in the document, unless it talks about the individual person's circumstances and how that affects violence, the propensity for them to commit violence. Nation state monopolies of force, no. Of increased literacy and communication, empathy. So empathy as a topic. But this is also a view of how that's, yeah, like, so maybe there would be something useful here, but I wouldn't probably seek this book out for that type of discussion. I would probably go to LLMs and I would ask, okay, what is the best LLM that points out how empathy affects someone's propensity to commit violence? And if it said Steven Pinker's book, then maybe I just go to that one section, I look at it. But the language instinct. Pinker argues that humans are born with innate capacity for language. So this is, yeah, we cover this. Yep. This we cover. This is also in that epilogue, the evolutionary architecture of shared meaning. Yeah, we can understand the coevolution of our biology and our culture through the lens of the Baldwin effect, which states that learned behaviors can influence the direction of evolution. At every step of the way, this development was still grounded in the personal biological mechanisms of the organism. I guess we don't really talk about language as the primary account, but we kind of, I think we're just leveraging the intuition that language is a part of culture here. So, you know, our language is one of, oh no, we got, okay. Although our DNA is now relatively set, our understanding and thought are inherently dynamic, still evolving alongside cultural shifts. We could think about our language as a living system within the constraints of nature. As it develops, so too does our perception and understanding allow for increasingly complex concepts as the language itself grows. We can look back at this development as roughly progressive. Each generation is born into a language system that enables more sophisticated levels of thought, allowing abstract ideas about morality, possibility, and intentionality to be internalized and passed on. Not too much, but I think you know, this whole discussion is clear with language. Actually, we do talk about Yeah, we talk about yeah, wait a second. Don't I actually make a real like dead on claim here? The capacity for shared meaning is not a recent invention, but the culmination of a multi-billion year evolutionary journey. By retrospectively applying the principles of our framework speculatively through time, we can trace the emergence of the very architecture that makes our reality possible. The story begins with the most fundamental principle of life. An organism exists in a constant feedback loop with its environment. For the simplest forms, this is a basic stimulus response system where an internal state change changes in response to the world, leading to a behavior. As we've previously outlined, a major evolutionary leap occurred with the development of complex nervous systems and eventually a limbic system. This introduced a new powerful layer into the internal state, affective embodied experience. The stimulus response loop was now mediated by feelings like fear, pleasure, or pain, marking the dawn of a recognizable subjective experience. We could see the intuitive origins of predictive processing as the brain evolves from a simple reactor to a sophisticated predictor, guided by the felt quality of its experience. Finally, the massive expansion of the prefrontal cortex, blah, blah, blah. But we talk, social coordination was inextricably connected to this entire development. We can most appropriately think about language here, not simply as words, but most abstractly as any communally developed stimulus. We should say stimuli. Nah, let's do stimulus. Such as gestures, sounds, or behaviors that allowed communication among individuals. We should do more than this, such as gestures would be behaviors, right? We could do it's like literally just chemical. What would be the word for this? Stimulus, whether that is chemical interaction? What's a good phrase for chemical interaction? I should have said word or phrase. Chemical reaction. I think we want interaction more. But yeah, chemical interaction. From chemical interaction to senses and behaviors. Now, how do we want to do this? Chemical interaction, sensory. Audio or visual stim. Because we're touching on different parts in our evolution, or like in evolution. So first it was just chemical, then it became like, you know, disconnected, where, you know, you might actually have you know, some type of stimulus or stimuli that's like farther external. Okay, what's going on here? So for future reference, do you think links like the one I sent earlier are fine for specific domains like economics, but if their conceptualization isn't concrete enough to be actualized by psychological science research, it isn't something I should recommend? No, I would just probably say just generally, like I don't think it's gonna be as beneficial to go into specific domains like that unless you were certain that they like yeah the real thing I'm trying to get at is I need some sense of like it needs to be obvious to me what the benefit is, and it would be much more compelling if like if there was some sense that like you knew what was already there. Now granted, for part 2 stuff, um you know, I would say just anything that you like, literally anything under the sun that contributes to identifying and achieving goals. Like I'll definitely take anything like that. Then there's also the other thing of like I think we are just gonna have the rule in here of not posting like random links like that, especially ones that like literally just download a PDF. But given that there's not many people here, I could just always flag that as a accept and then see the link. I believe Susan Pinker's work on face-to-face interaction is relevant to this portion of the document. I think that would be actually pretty relevant. Susan Pinker. Oh my gosh, is this his sister? I thought we were talking his wife, but this looks like she looks exactly like him. Yeah, wow. Oh my gosh. What do we got? Sexual paradox, the village effect, how face-to-face contact can make okay, yeah. Awesome. No, that's great. This is part 2. This is going to be under social dynamics, the benefits of social relationships. Susan Pinker. Okay, I want to make sure that this makes sense. We can most appropriately think about language here not simply as words, but most abstractly as any communally developed stimulus. Stimulus response system, chemical, audio, visual, etc., that allowed communication among individual organisms. We could just say among organisms. This abstract language becomes a crucial part of the environment that each individual's predictive brain must model. Okay, so now we've gone straight up to for humans. This abstract language becomes a crucial part of the environment that each individual's predictive brain must model. How do we say this? We shouldn't say must model. We shouldn't even say does model, but it's something that it incorporates. Incorporates? What's in it? Incorporate synonym. Include, encompasses, integrates. Integrates. When one individual produces a signal, it acts as a powerful piece of sensory data for another, creating a cascade of predictions about the first individual's intentions, beliefs, and future actions. This constant interactive loop of signaling and modeling is the very mechanism by which thought is negotiated and meaning is shared. All right. But then we get into the real stuff. I'm excited for reading through this when the time comes, because these are some of the these ideas are so cool. But But yeah, our framework suggests a dynamic in which each individual's unique subjective experience and understanding co-evolves through constant social interaction. All right, let's get back to part 2. We're at an hour 45. We could go for like a few more minutes. I'm confused if anything related to how human behavior is organized is relevant for part 2. No. Part 2 is all about... Part 2 is all about identifying and pursuing our goals. So, generally speaking, I have this social part in here because a lot of our goals require social dynamics and relationships. But that, you know what? Now that you mention it, though, I'm sorry. This shouldn't go here, though. This kind of goes here. There's a like a gray line or a blurry line between part 2 and part 3, given that a lot of the things that help you achieve and pursue your goals, regardless of what they are, also help you live a more emotionally rewarding life. So yeah, the question is going to be how much of this is part 2 versus part 3. Definitely part 3, we're going to have a discussion about how social relationships affect how fulfilling people's lives feel. So that's certainly going to, like, we're going to reuse this. We're going to leverage this in both parts. If in part 2. Yeah, and I'm guessing it'll be mainly part 3, but maybe it'll be part 2. But something like emotion management is something that is relevant towards your ability to pursue your goals. And so that's why we discuss that here, as even though it seems related to part 3. But here we go. Then wouldn't that theory I mentioned be relevant for part 2, since I'm certain it has to do with the structure of human behavior, not just in economics, but all social sciences, unless I was misinterpreting your criteria. I think you were misinterpreting the criteria. For part 2, we're looking for practical information. Like, there's something deeply practical about this. Like, it tells us that we can put ourselves into positions where we're getting face-to-face contact. But it's like, it's also something where it's like, it needs to be like obviously practical. Like, I'm not in a position where I need to I want to read another Being in Time. Like, I can't spend the time to digest a really inaccessible, opinionated, philosophical conceptualization, and then figure out how it could be relevant or useful. I'm gonna have to be pretty streamlined here. Does part 2 at all discuss the work by neurologist Viktor Frankl on logotherapy as solution to emotional problems? I mean, it doesn't. Our notes are just an outline right now. So, logotherapy. Actually, I'm gonna get ChatGPT on this one. Can you explain logotherapy, and is it still accepted as a practical tool today? Is a form of psychotherapy developed by Viktor Frankl, an Austrian neurologist, psychiatrist, and Holocaust survivor. It's often referred to as the third Viennese school of psychotherapy. Will to meaning. Human beings are motivated by deep desire to find meaning in their lives. So this would be part 3. While we cannot always control circumstances, we have the freedom to choose how we respond to them. That's part 1 and part 2. Meaning and suffering. This would be part 3. Unique meaning for each person. Meaning isn't universal or fixed. It must be discovered by each individual in the context of their own life. This is part 1, 2, and 3. In therapy, logotherapists might use techniques such as Socratic dialogue. So this is the general, what we would actually take. Socratic dialogue, though, I think that's already kind of covered by what we're talking about. De-reflection, shifting focus away from oneself towards meaningful tasks or others. This would be something that we talk about in part 3, probably with a more of like a focused exploration of that topic. Paradoxical intention, using humor and exaggeration to reduce anxiety around fears. It's still practiced, but often integrated into other therapeutic approaches rather than used in isolation. Yeah, so I think all this stuff is just going to kind of be covered by the more clear, empirically tested science facets that we are going to cover, or that we literally already have notes for. That said, I think Frankl might even be Frankl, meaning and purpose. Look at this. This is in this is in notes that are gonna have to be organized. But we have Frankl down here as well. This is part 3. We have a whole section on Viktor Frankl. Yeah. Oh, we literally have Viktor Frankl's logotherapy right here. Nice. All right, well, I'll probably either keep or get rid of stuff from him later on. Okay, what are we at? 8:01. Yeah, I think we're going to call it. I think we got to call it. Addiction. Yes. I might work on this stuff off stream because it is really just organization at this point. I guess it always was, but I mean, I don't want to say we're not in a rush, but we do have a ton of work to do on the content of part 1 and improving part 1. Addiction. Sociology, the way we behave in certain fundamental situations. So this, I'm putting this into the social dynamics section. What was this? Effective social? No, this would be empathy. No, I don't even know. I'm just going to put it here. This is more so like this is more social, like biases almost, rather than what we have currently. Zen to Done. This is a well-known productivity system that modifies David Allen's Getting Things Done to focus on building simple, essential habits. So this would be something that we can put later on in like in a full process, holistic view. Oh man! All right, I gotta get fired up. We gotta fight some things. All right. Thank you, Energy Geometry, though, for the discussions and the recommendations. I'm sorry that I am pushing back so hard on some of these, but yeah, I think it's necessary. I'm going to switch over to Hades, so I'm going to cut the stream and then we'll be back in a second here, and I'm going to be over here now. All right. Be